A minute. All right, great. Welcome to the afternoon session here on Tuesday, February 28th of the House of Government Operations Military Affairs Committee. We're here this afternoon to take some additional testimony on H-270, which is the miscellaneous cannabis housekeeping bill for the Cannabis Control Board. And where our first witness this morning is Jeffrey Pizzatulo of the Vermont Growers Association. So thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Chair. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, loud and clear.
Excellent. I may, if it's okay, I may just turn off my video just to ensure that the audio goes through. Sometimes we have bandwidth issues, if that's appropriate.
Oh, that's totally fine.
Thanks so much. Awesome. So I really appreciate the time, Vice Chair, Chair, members of the committee. Sorry, I was not able to make it today. Really tried. The storm here in Burlington really picked up in the Chittenden County area. We thought it was going to be less than an inch. We got, looks like over 3 inches now. So, but anyway, I hope everyone is very well. I'm here today to talk about two major areas. I'm going to introduce myself first. For those who may not be familiar, I think we were here a couple years ago, so it has been some time. So after introductions, I'm going to go into the Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition's priorities, and then I'm going to talk about product registration reforms. So thank you again for the time. For the record, my name is Jeffrey Pizzatulo. I'm the co-founder and the executive director of the Vermont Growers Association. We're a 501c4 mutual benefit nonprofit. Though we have growers in our name, we're proud to serve the entire supply chain. Our dues-paying members include retailers, product manufacturers, distributors, non-plant touching businesses that are relevant to the industry, security companies, insurance companies, whatnot, in addition to cultivators and growers. So a little bit about us. Vermont Growers Association is a participant, a founding member of the Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition. The Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition, for those that are unaware, is an interstate coalition of member-based nonprofits that we feel reflect the intersectionality of cannabis. The members of our organizations represent the local communities that are most impacted by not just the adult use marketplace, but also the medical marketplace. And those member organizations are the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance, Justice for All, NOFA Vermont, Rural Vermont, Green Mountain Patients Alliance, and us as well, Vermont Growers Association. We have come together over the past several years to arrive at policy and advocate together, again, to serve the communities that we represent. And we feel like that is important to this conversation. We're not coming to you guys as individual lobbyists representing our clients. Frankly, we represent tens of thousands of Vermonters collectively as a coalition. And we feel like that should be considered during these discussions. And we are very proud of the Vermonters that we represent here today and moving forward. In addition to the Interstate Coalition, over the past year, the Vermont Growers Association has also formed a national coalition of trade associations called the National Craft Cannabis Association. I'm sorry, the National Craft Cannabis Coalition, the NCCC. The NCCC consists of member-based nonprofits across the country that have come together to advocate and represent our individual state markets and our members in Washington, D.C. We are very proud that last year, for those that aren't familiar, the NCCC introduced for the first time in our nation's history, cannabis legislation, federal cannabis legislation that includes and seeks to protect small farmers, small producers, and the interstate markets that our respective states set up. So we don't only engage state politics and state advocacy, but we also are active, and we're very proud to be active now in Washington, D.C. And we think that is very important as we are looking ahead, federal legalization will be coming up, it is important that Vermonters, our small farmers, our small businesses are protected when that inevitability occurs. So happy to speak a little bit about not just state advocacy and policy, but also federal policy as well, should anyone have any questions. I just want to remind everybody. Oh, I'm sorry.
I have a question.
Are you taking some notes now, or do you want to wait?
I'll defer to Mr. Pizzutillo on that. Would you be okay with taking a question, or would you like to finish your testimony first?
Please, questions at any time, and anyone, please feel free to stop me. Thank you.
Go ahead, Representative Morlicki.
Sure. I heard you speak of developing policies around equity. Is there a place we could see a copy of those policies?
Absolutely, and thanks for raising that, Representative. I was actually just about to go into that, so I really appreciate that question. I did email everybody, the Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition, about, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes ago, 30 minutes ago, top of the hour. Everyone should have in their inbox, hopefully, the list of supporting documents that I'll be referring to in testimony today. There are a series of them. And I will be starting with the Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition 2023 priorities. So you should have some PDFs in your inbox.
And I would say, Mr. Pizzutillo, that I think that some of the things that you mentioned are related to the specific items that are in H270 and the proposals that we've been discussing so far. Some of them might be things that are new or different that aren't included in that draft bill. It might be helpful for the committee to, if you could kind of characterize the things that you're talking about just in terms of whether there are things that are specifically about the bill that's before us versus, priorities you'd like to see us take a look at that aren't already under consideration. Some of the things that I think are in the supporting documents are things that are being discussed in committees elsewhere in the building. So I just want to make sure that committee's not totally overwhelmed by the amount of information that's coming at them.
Certainly, and there's lots of moving parts with cannabis, and not just adult use, but within the medical as well. And I think that's important framing, and thank you, Chair, for raising that. We see 270, the miscellaneous cannabis bill, including reforms, not just for adult use, for medical. So we would like to speak to both of those areas, and please stop me if it's a subject matter that you feel is appropriate for another committee, and I'll happy to skip over that. But just stepping back, one thing that is really important to us is an inclusive process, and I would like to just pause and take a moment and say that one of the reasons why our coalition joined is because we feel really they represent the stakeholders in this conversation. So in my testimony today, I urge you to please consider inviting back not just myself, but my colleagues around the Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition, because we feel like it is important to have those stakeholders around the table in this conversation, and not just for 270, but also for the other cannabis bill that was, I believe, just referred to committee this morning, perhaps. Was it H26, or I'm sorry, 426?
I haven't even had a chance to take a look at that yet.
Yep,
but it is on our wall. Yep. It is on our wall.
There it is. Yep, H426, absolutely. So, and thank you for that time, for the time today again, but I just wanted to underscore, really, it is incumbent on all of us to include as many stakeholders as possible, and we would like to join you guys in later this session, not just to talk about, again, 270, but 426. Excellent. So I'm going to dive into our priorities. And the first document I'm going to start with is the Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition 2023 priorities. That should be available to you all in PDF form over email. So what we're looking at here are 10 priorities, and really, before I begin, these are what we like to sort of frame as these are people priorities. So even before we get into more advanced conversation about refining licensure, and things of that nature, and even the nuances of product registration, which I'll be speaking to later today. These are people priorities. These are priorities that help build the foundation for the marketplace. And that foundational work is incomplete. And so that is the framing for really these priorities. And we feel the market should not advance without addressing most of these, if not all of them. And so the first one is 20% tax revenue reinvestment into communities disproportionately harmed in the Community Reinvestment Fund administered by members of these communities. What we see in other states, notably New York State and many others, Illinois, Massachusetts, they designate New Jersey, they designate on average 30%. I believe New York State is 40% of the excise tax for reinvestment. And so we are asking for Vermont to do the same. Right now, there is no appropriations for community reinvestment. So we are asking that we work on that and that figure be 20%. And then we have some details in our policy for exactly how that should be administered. The boards and the programs that are a part of this point one. Moving to point two, 10% revenue to the Cannabis Business Development Fund. We're aware the CBDF is a program now. It has been funded with, I believe, initial appropriations of $500,000 from the general fund. We are asking for ongoing funding at 10% for this Community Business Development Fund. So up front, our priority is 30% basic reinvestment into our communities here in the state from this very lucrative emerging marketplace. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I don't think we have any questions at the table yet.
All right. Excellent. So moving on, direct market access for small cultivators and manufacturers. Direct market access, we like to say, is a missing pillar of the marketplace. No adult use marketplace will arrive at viability until there is some reasonable degree of direct market access. And that's just not here in Vermont, that's across the country. If you look at more mature markets, adult use markets, notably on the West Coast, there are states now that are using the State House legislation to bail out their small producers, to bail out their small cannabis farmers and manufacturers because of lack of market structure and an equitable foundation. Direct market access is essential to the marketplace. We believe it is in alignment with Vermont's principles as a small agrarian state that focuses on small cottage industry. And so we are asking for consideration this year for direct market access using scale appropriate regulations. And we define that as indoor tier 1 through 2, mixed and outdoor tier 1 through 3. And then for manufacturers, our at scale regulation uses an annual gross cap, which, if you're familiar, is what the CCD uses for their tier 1 manufacturing right now. Our cap for tier 1 and 2 manufacturers for direct market access is capped at 2 million annual gross. So that's how we define a small manufacturer. Moving on, point 4, agricultural use and exemptions. If we recall, last year, and we were very active in this, our coalition, Bill S-188, which was introduced several cannabis-related policies with regards to agriculture. One of them was standing up, basically, for lack of a better word, a third sort of agricultural light designation. So this falls not within the Agency of Ag, but within the CCB. And instead of assigning just standard agricultural designation to cannabis cultivation, we sort of, the committee decided to recreate some of those benefits. Some of those benefits of land use and local control were afforded to limited licenses. Currently, the agricultural designations in statute are limited to tier 1 cultivators and those in current use. So this year we are revisiting the conversation, and we are seeking that those benefits get extended to all tiers of cultivation, and also explicitly include agricultural structures. We have, and this issue, item 4, agricultural use and exemptions, cannot be overstated the importance. We have an active market right now. We have licensees in localities throughout the state that are struggling with their municipality, their local select board, in terms of local control, and basically many of them are being asked or being told they need to give up where they're currently operating and move to a light manufacturing commercial district. Completely unacceptable. If tier 1 is allowed to do that, how come a tier 2, tier 3 cannot? Also, in terms of agricultural structures, this is like processing, trimming, that should be allowed explicitly in agricultural structures. And so we just want to make sure that all of this is included in statute this year, and we take care of it. And we also do believe that the tax department supports this policy of expanding agricultural designation for all tiers. We have heard through the CCB that their motivation is just to simplify the tax code. So that is something that we seek. I'll just pause for a moment if there's any questions.
I have heard some interest from our Senate colleagues in taking up a couple of the issues that you mentioned earlier in the priorities, but I am interested in I guess understanding more about whether there's clarity among your members about the difference between, local approval and adherence to local and municipal bylaws and zoning regulations versus having a license. Some of the questions that I've gotten from other members are that there seems to be some conflict between local select boards and licensees, where the licensee got their license from the Cannabis Control Board, and then the select board feels like they have to give that licensee bad news about their local zoning or bylaws prohibiting the activity that their license allows them to do, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they can do that activity in the spot that they want, according to local zoning. So are you saying you want us to exempt all of those tiers from local and municipal zoning?
Correct. And without naming towns, you're absolutely correct. There are licensees that have been awarded, and sort of after the fact, their local, select board determined, decided to stand up their own local cannabis control board, and then re-examine, licensees that are already in operation on farmland, mind you. So absolutely, it's an active issue. This matter alone will bring resolve and closure to countless active licensees that are contributing to the market right now and making money. If there's nothing else, moving on. Point 5, increase home grow allowances. This is something that I believe the agency is supporting this year, albeit incrementally, and for the medical patient side only. We are asking that the same allowances get applied to adult use as well. Moving on, point 6, expungement. If we recall, I believe S234, which became Act 167 in 2021, is our expungement legislation that is limited to, I believe, the state parameters for what has been legalized. So that's 2 ounces of possession and 2 plants cultivation. We think that is a great start, but those numbers really, in effect, limit expungement to consumers. Most licensees, most of Vermont's cannabis professionals were not caught in years past with 2 plants. They were caught with maybe 50 plants. These are the individuals that we're trying to bring up on board. They want to pay taxes. It's only fair that they get included in this restorative justice from the state. We ask that it get done cost-free and automatic, similar to what is being done now. The last time I heard the update on our current expungement processing, I believe it is expected to be done January 1st, 2024, if I'm not mistaken. And I think there's around 11,000 individual cases that are working to get expunged automatically through the court system. And they're correct me if I'm wrong, I think they're around 4,000 right now. So they're on track to get that done. There's a lot more Vermonters that need this restorative justice. So we're asking to expand that to all possession limits and all plan counts of nonviolent offenses. Just a quick point, this is becoming a trend in other states as well. It is New York State's doing this. A little bit more complete expungement is becoming really the standard here, and we're just asking that Vermont join that. Moving on, this is a little nuanced. The Tier 1 manufacturing license is capped, as I've mentioned earlier today, at 10,000 annual gross. That is, we have come to determine that is not practical. And this is not a slight at the CCB who devised this Tier 1 manufacturing license, which is in effect like a home occupancy sort of light manufacturing license for those who want to operate at their house, maybe do this on the side. But they could not foresee these banking fees. The agency could not foresee the licensing fees, the insurance fees, I should say, and really the accumulation of expenses to just get this license. We have Tier 1 manufacturers committee that are projecting, 13,000 in expenses when their license is capping them at 10,000. So I believe the CCB is even asking for a little bit of a bump in that figure. They're currently undergoing, if you're familiar, a rules amendment process. They've reopened some of their rules. I believe they're proposing a 50,000 figure. We are asking for 100,000. We got that figure from Tier 1 manufacturers themselves. So that's
not a statutory change. That's all in rules.
It's in both. It's in statute.
Okay.
Yep. So it's one of those things that we're understanding this process as well. Some things in rules and some things that are unique to statute, and then there's crossover. There are some areas of policy where they move in collaboration. This is one of those areas. Moving on, point 8, I do believe there is a propagation license, correct me if I'm wrong, in 270. So this breeding license, there is.
We do have that. This is the same as the propagation license that we have, or does the propagation license language we have in 270 cover this?
I think we would like to have a conversation about that propagation license. But what you will find is there will be some overlap. There are some areas where what we're seeking, the agency is also seeking. May not be identical, but it'll be similar. So this is one of those areas. It is important to seed, no pun intended, this market, and not just licensees, but also home growers. Like where are these, whomever is growing this plant that's now legal in the state, where are they to obtain this plant? Let's create a system for that. Let's create a market for that. Let's give them safe, tested products. So not just licensees can get starts, but also maybe home growers as well. Other states have propagation licenses. Moving on. Point 9, we are asking that all all licensed cultivators be able to sell seeds and living plants, specifically immature plants, directly to the public. This is a little bit of a gray area. If we recall, a couple of years ago, there's sort of like this notion called the DEA letter. I don't know if those are familiar. A couple of years ago, a well-known cannabis law firm in Colorado wrote a letter to the DEA asking for clarification on their enforcement of high THC cannabis seeds. And the DEA wrote back their interpretation, and in effect, they shared that they're moving away from the source rule for enforcement, and they're now using the hemp bill or threshold, THC threshold, for enforcement of cannabis seeds. So basically what we heard is at the federal level, the enforcement agency is beginning to acknowledge that seeds and really anything that falls under the the THC threshold in the hemp bill does not qualify as high THC or is legal. This is a gray area they created. Nationally, there are cannabis breeders selling seeds and living plants. We ask that in Vermont, we provide that with explicit language and allow for cultivators to move forward and sell that directly to the public. And mind you, one of the things that we're asking, and this is all sort of summary, but within point 9, we do ask the CCB, for instance, to stand up sampling and testing protocol for living plants and seeds. So, there are some nuances to this and just sort of walking through the committee these policy points. And that's really important to have safe products, not just for public health, but also for the safety of the market itself. And I'm happy to speak to that more in detail if you'd like. Just to round out this document, point 10, that brings us to medical cannabis policy. And this I did provide in my email. There is a separate document from the Green Mountain Patients Alliance with enumerated priorities for this year. I will go through some of them, and you may, if you're, I'm sorry.
I just want to say, Jeffrey, I have a couple other witnesses, and we're really just getting started on this bill today. You've given us a lot. So I'm wondering if you'd be willing to kind of wrap up your testimony here so that we can get to those other witnesses who are here in the room today. And I'm happy to talk with you offline about having you back if there are specific things. You've gotten pretty expansive and outside of the bill that we're considering with some of the priorities and the requests and recommendations that you brought for us. I want to have the opportunity to read through some of what you sent, talk with some of my colleagues, and talk with you and some of the other folks from the association offline. But I think for today, if you could kind of give us if you could wrap up your testimony in the next couple of minutes, that'd be really helpful. And I'm happy to invite you back in the future.
I appreciate that, and thanks for jumping in. If I may conclude with moving over to the product registration reforms, they're rather brief and succinct, and I think they are germane to 270. We are asking this committee to consider including all of these reforms. If that's okay, I think I can do that in a couple minutes.
Yeah, sure.
Terrific. And thank you again for entertaining further conversation on those priorities that we just went through. It is very important, not just for our coalition, but for the industry to explore those priorities with all the stakeholders in the room. And I really appreciate, Chair, you offering that in the future, not just in committee, but offline. So moving over to, briefly to wrap up, moving over to the VGA product registration reforms. Over the past couple of weeks, we have been working with licensees and some members of the agency who arrive at solutions for specifically product registration. So stepping back for a moment, what is product registration? The agency has a pretty good testing protocol for products in the supply chain, and also in the supply chain for a product to reach market. It not only has to get tested, has to have compliant labeling and packaging and safety mechanisms, but it needs to be the final product needs to be submitted to the agency through its portal in the form of product registration. And that submission requires approval or confirmation from the agency. So before a product can be brought to market, it needs to be submitted through product registration, and then you need to receive approval, and then you can bring it to market. So why are we talking about this? If we recall, earlier this month, the Cannabis Control Board issued Vermont's first product recall. And there are several moving parts to why that product recall occurred. Some of them can be attributed to long turnaround times for testing labs. Some of them can be attributed to the regulations within testing themselves need to be tweaked a little bit. But really, most importantly, product registration is the culprit, and not just germane to this product recall and the overall safety of the market, but also product registration is threatening the livelihoods right now of licensees. And I cannot understate this enough. Most states have some sort of product registration, but no state has a approval process where a product cannot move to market without the agency having some hand in the process. And so why is that important? That process right now, committee, is taking on average about a month. We have licensees that submitted a product to the board back in October that just received approval the other week. So the turnaround time for product registration is critical. We believe that this process should take no longer than 5 days. This is an agricultural commodity product. Not only does it have a shelf life, but what we're finding is these turnaround times are non-operable. Licensees are bringing things to market without having that approval. And in effect, that ultimately helped contribute to the market's first product recall. So how do we alleviate this? We arrived at 6-point reforms, just to go through them very briefly. I know I was supposed to wrap up. Point 1, appropriate funds for agency-run lab and that can cover all of the mandated testing, including pesticide, along with 3 full-time staff. Some of these points are actually also what the board is asking for. We sort of go above and beyond. So some of these may sound familiar. Point 2, we are asking for appropriate funds for 2 full-time staff and to direct the agency to hire 2 full-time staff specifically to work on product registration. We were told by members in the agency that would help alleviate this issue. That is essential to get done this year. Moving on, we want to remove the product registration fee, or at least reduce it by 50%. Right now, it's $50 for every product you register. It costs $50. That is cost prohibitive for most. Moving on, point 4, allow a licensee to bring a product to market 5 business days after it's been submitted by complete product registration. So not incomplete, it needs to be a complete submission, and renewals would go through immediately. Wrapping up here, direct the CCB to require testing labs to submit the COA for each registered product. This is really about matching and just arriving at certainty for each product, so we know that people aren't falsifying records. And then lastly, all of this activity creates a database. We believe this database should be made public, so anyone can take a registered product number, look it up, and find all of the safety details for that product. And I believe that the CCB said that they are moving forward on point 6. So, we are at times in alignment with the agency, at times asking for above and beyond. What we are finding here is this agency is having trouble multitasking from an operational standpoint. They're moving staff from department to department to work on things. And so we're just asking for a little bit more staffing in each of these areas. Product registration is vital. There are hundreds of products on the marketplace right now. This needs to get taken care of. I thank you for your time. I look forward to future discussions offline and also in committee. Thank you.
You have given us a lot to think about, and glad to hear there's some alignment with the priorities and some of the items that the control board brought. But we're kind of at the beginning of our work on cannabis here and doing quite a number of other lifts this year. So appreciate all the background info that you gave us. So we're going to keep moving here. I asked Dave Silverman to join us in his professional life as the co-founder of Flora Cannabis to make real some of the conversation that we're having in H270 around packaging and to share his thoughts. So.
Thank you, Chair McCarthy. It's a pleasure to be with you again. My name is Dave Silverman. In addition to being the High Bailiff of Addison County, I am also the co-founder of Flora Cannabis, Vermont's first licensed cannabis store, located in beautiful downtown Middlebury. And I'm also an attorney to dozens of cannabis licensed businesses throughout the state in every stage of production, from grower to retailer, other retailers as well. And I've been a leading advocate for cannabis law reform here in the State House since 2015. This is the third biennium in a row that I've had the pleasure of testifying in front of this committee on this topic, and so thank you for that. This combination of roles has afforded me a somewhat unique perspective on the rollout of Vermont's regulated cannabis market, on what's gone well and what hasn't. And so thank you for letting me be here to speak to you a bit about that. To start, a lot is working very well. The CCB did a heroic job of launching the market on time, despite being severely understaffed and their late appointment to get started. Their rules are clear and concise. Their staff and their leadership is available and responsive to stakeholder concerns. They are a model agency, among the best that, in my professional capacity as a lawyer, among the best state agency that I've ever had to deal with. And our market, despite its flaws, is the most welcoming one in the nation to small businesses, as evidenced by the almost 200 tier 1 small cultivators licensed in the market already, just not even a year in. And our cultivators, by the way, are producing amazing product. Our customers at Flora are constantly telling us how happy they are with what they've bought, and they're constantly telling us how pleased they are to have regulated cannabis in the marketplace and the great things that it has done for their overall wellness. But there are significant difficulties holding this young industry back from its full potential. And I was happy to see H270 begin to address some of these. In my written testimony, which is up on your website now, I've addressed several areas of concern, including advertising, product registration, and executive overreach by both DLL and the Department of Tax in ways that are really threatening to this industry. But in my limited time here, I want to focus just on packaging. Vermont is an extreme outlier in restricting packaging of cannabis products to 50 milligrams of THC per package. Only Virginia, which has passed a recreational cannabis law but has not launched its market and probably will not in the next couple of years, joins Vermont at 50 milligrams. Michigan allows 200, and then every other state with regulations over how much can go into a packages is at 100. So there is a clear national consensus of 100 milligrams per package that only Vermont is below. Even among the only two other states that have a 5 milligram per serving limit like Vermont, that's Connecticut and Massachusetts, even those two states allow 100 milligrams per package. By having the amount of product that can go into a single package, we have doubled the per serving cost of packaging. This hurts consumers most. Because of this low limit, combined with the CCB's only in the nation plastics ban in packaging, about 10% of the pre-tax cost of edibles in Vermont is attributable to packaging, in my experience. The question is there a benefit to this rule? Does this rule have something that makes it worthwhile? And let me say, all responsible cannabis businesses acknowledge the unique risks that edibles have, particularly in the form of accidental ingestion by children. Many of us, myself and my business partner at Flora included, are parents ourselves. We are very sensitive to this. But we must also acknowledge that the 50 milligram limit does not provide any additional protection, and that increasing the limit to 100, as is the national consensus, would not carry any additional risk. This committee heard last year from Dr. Caleb Freeman. He's the Director of Emergency Medicine Research at UVM and a clinician in the emergency department there. And he testified that there is no meaningful difference in expected outcomes between even the smallest toddler who presents having accidentally consumed 50 milligrams of THC versus 100. In either case, it's a very scary experience. It is not something you want to happen. But no long-term harm would be expected, again, in either case. According to Dr. Freeman's testimony, it would take an extremely large dose, grams per kilogram of body weight. That's tens of thousands of milligrams of THC for a 15-pound, 20-pound toddler, for the accidental ingestion to become life-threatening. Tens of thousands of milligrams of THC is like a third to half of my inventory room at Flora. It's a massive amount. So when we cut through the fear, no matter how well-intentioned it is, and when we focus on the medical science, it is very clear that the 50 milligram limit serves no public safety benefit. It only imposes unnecessary cost. Now, on the same vein, I ask that you further make a distinction in the packaging requirements, and this is in law, not rule, as between products like edibles, gummies, which are in childproof containers, right? I'll pass these around if you guys would like to take a look. And packaging, so products like edibles, which are intoxicating when consumed accidentally or consumed orally, and products that are not, like vape cartridges. Currently, they have to be in childproof containers, but if you swallow this, you'd have a very bad gastrointestinal episode, but you wouldn't experience any intoxicating effect. Or pre-rolls or flour, which are currently not required to be packaged in childproof containers. So there are other products that are more like flour and less like edibles. For example, hash. Currently, hash has to be sold in a childproof, very difficult to open container. But if you were to eat this, you wouldn't get high. You would have an upset stomach for sure, but it would just pass through you. Similar to a pre-roll. A pre-roll is interesting. If it's all flour, it gets to be packaged like flour, not childproof. If you infuse the pre-roll with wax, now it's a product. It has to be packed in a childproof container. You combine this with the no plastics rule, and you end up with an impossibly expensive package for the type of product that it is. And so I ask that you expand the distinction that you made last year, which is a wise distinction between edibles and flour, to other products, manufactured products like hash, like vapes. Expand that distinction in the packaging law. And so I'll stop there. While I'd be happy to go into things like the product registration system or the very onerous advertising rules that are likely unconstitutional. I'll stop here and I'll take any questions on those other topics or this topic as well. And would be happy to, if anyone is interested in seeing how packaging looks in the wild, would pass those along.
Have either Representative Chase or Merwick pass those down. I'm specifically interested in the packaging that you had with edibles. Is that 10 5 milligram?
This is a package of 10 5 milligram gummies. If you were to open that and take off the freshness seal, go ahead. That's not going back on my shelf. if you were to open that, you'll see that there's quite a lot of room in there for another 10. They are very good. That would be a live rosin gummy made with an indica strain in a sour cherry flavor.
It's a terrible idea to eat one.
Right before you go into a technical amendments bill, yes, it would be a bad idea. I would go for a sativa.
Really doesn't hear anybody. But hey.
Nice brand.
Thank you.
You say this one's not childproof?
This is childproof, but it does not need to be. That is a vape cartridge. While you're looking, so that's a vape cartridge filled with oil. It looks quite a lot like a nicotine vape cartridge, except it's filled with THC liquid. This is technically also a vape. This is called an herbal vape. It has a heating element that is electronically triggered, and you put cannabis flower in here. You, I guess, theoretically could put tobacco in here as well, but it would make you extremely ill if you were to try to consume cannabis this way. The Department of Taxes.
You mean if you were trying to consume tobacco?
Tobacco in this way, yeah, sorry, thank you.
Instigate one hell of a.
The Department of Taxes has decided that this device is subject to the vape tax that the legislature passed in 2018 or 2019. That is a 92% tax at the wholesale level. That's because the law was written quite broadly, and it said any electronic device used for consuming nicotine or any other substance. This retails for $150 online. As a retailer, I can buy this wholesale for about $85. If I were to buy this wholesale, pay the 92% tax on it, and sell it for $150, I would take a loss on every single unit I sold. You can buy it online as a Vermont resident. They will ship it to you. And because there is no Vermont wholesaler involved, they don't have to collect that tax. There's no sense in this tax being applied to these products. This is a safer way of consuming cannabis than this pre-roll. You consume less of it, you get less smoke in your lung. As a result, all of these electronic devices are effectively quite difficult to get anywhere in Vermont, except from an online retailer. So this tax is only serving to hurt local small businesses, and downtown retailers like mine who are working very hard to keep our downtowns thriving and engaging to the community.
Morgan. So question, we spend copious amounts of time and money fighting nicotine. But yet I think I just heard you say less harmful or less dangerous by vaping or something that if you didn't. So that doesn't jive for me.
So cannabis consumption is very different than nicotine consumption in terms of its health risks. You may recall there was a study many, many years ago. It was a twin study, and it looked at the impact of cannabis use on the IQ of twins, one twin who did and one twin who did not. It was an Australian study. They actually kept up with those people for 30 years. And a second study came out about 5 years ago. And they looked at health effects of cannabis smoke. And because of the way people consume cannabis, which is very different than cigarettes, you don't, a 2-pack a day smoker, if that person were to consume 40 joints, it's just, they pass out, they'd be asleep. It's just too much. So people consume a lot less cannabis than they consume nicotine on a volume basis. And so it turns out that there's no long-term health effects no serious long-term health effects as you would expect from smoking cannabis. There is no increased risk of cardiovascular disease, no increased risk of lung disease. They did find a slightly increased risk of gum disease. That was a weird one, but that was it. So the difference between smoking and vaping is is just even less than that. So if you smoke cannabis versus vaping cannabis, you take in less of the harmful chemicals in any smoke. So it's a harm reduction tool in that sense.
So no nexus to cancers or?
Correct? Yeah,
Interesting.
unexpected.
Representative Byron.
Thank you.
No, Mr. Silverman, Dave, thank you so much for coming in. It's always, I mean, you put years of work into this at every aspect of the market. So I really appreciate your lived experience and working knowledge. I wanted to talk a little bit more about packaging costs. Like what's a per unit range on, I know the conversation is cycling a little bit more specifically in the bill regarding the edibles. What's the dollar range that the packaging is seeing right now as an applied?
So for edibles, right, which need to achieve childproofing, so you can't just use a mason jar, for example. I bought these in a very, very large quantity in order to get a price break. I spent almost $15,000 in order to reduce my cost with shipping, by the way, which is, it's all freight. It's very expensive because it's very heavy. So we're at about 92 cents, which is a heavily discounted.
That's the lowest number.
Right. And the label, right? The label adds another like 32 cents or so because we, there's the CCB, God love them. They have a lot of requirements for what we put on a label. So we have this, listen, you throw regulations at me and I comply. So we comply, but it's expensive. I think if you were not buying this kind of package in the quantity that we were, if you were a smaller operator, if you were trying to, not have that very large initial outlay of cash, you'd be closer to $1.50 per unit. So if you put, $1.50, 10 pieces, that's 15 cents each. If you have 20, that's 7.5 cents each.
So, and I know this just kind of popped in my head because of conversations surrounding the auto bill. There are no currently like any type of deposits or refills or anything like that's allowable. So these are all just cycling into the recycling stream.
So
has consistency issues, of course.
the CCB has banned plastic, which is, I think, the most difficult thing to reliably recycle. If you take a look at Flora's very nice packaging, we have metal and we have glass, both, easier to recycle than plastic. Glass, really like recyclable over and over and over again. And of course, cardboard. This lid, part of the reason it's so expensive, this lid is home compostable. It'll break down. Your colleague Kyle Pepper, he tested it at home. I think he said it broke down in his garden in 60 days. Impressive, expensive. So in terms of reuse in the store, there is a voluntary program that the CCB has allowed retailers to collect. We don't have the space or capability at Flora to do that. We would need to, especially for food products, really sterilize it. It's just not economically feasible.
Okay.
Yeah. It is recyclable. You can throw it in your home recycling.
Yeah. I'm just thinking of the volumes of those items that are going into the recycling stream at this point, though.
Yeah, it's.
And I just seen like consumers at home are just seeing piles and piles of these things pile up on their back porches. And
the biggest waste stream in other states is pre-roll tubes. The cheapest way to package a pre-roll is in a small plastic container.
Yeah.
And so you'll see if you go to California, Colorado, any of these other states, you will see, pre-roll tubes everywhere, just street trash, and that's very unfortunate. So cardboard is a great solution. It's actually pretty affordable. We recently found a way to save about half on our cardboard packaging, so that's exciting. But plastics is a significant problem that fortunately we don't. On the one hand, fortunately we don't have in Vermont. On the other hand, it does lead to significant cost, which is why, most people in the industry would agree that, it's really important to increase that packaging limit.
So just to that point where like there's other standards in other states, how do we compare just on, what you have in your hand right now with the 10-piece 5 milligram, at least the edibles? Yeah. At that price point, how does that compare to other states?
I mean, you go to another state and you'll see them in a plastic baggie, that has maybe a foil seal for freshness and, a little zip. The zip is childproof because you have to like put your thumb in they're really annoying. Have you ever tried one? I hate them. Sense. And another problem we have in Vermont is our market is so small, we can't really do the kind of volume that would make sense in other states. So if I were a manufacturer in Colorado or California, I could go and do a very beautifully branded metal tin. And if I bought 300,000 of those tins, it would come all pre-embossed and would probably cost me about 30 cents a piece. I can't do that volume. 300,000 tins would be 10 years worth of, for the entire market.
It could be the life cycle of your entire business.
Beyond. So for us to do that sort of thing in Vermont, again, you go from 30 cents to $1.30. It really, packaging is a major cost driver in this industry. Like I said, about 10% of the cost of edibles.
Thank you. I'm sure I'll have more for you, but I'm good right now. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Silberman? Representative Nugent, go ahead. Yeah, please.
And so just to be clear, like in terms of like health impacts, your background's in law, right?
Correct.
Okay.
I think Representative Nugent will be hearing a bit more about some of the public health pieces. And I know we were looking for somebody to talk about some of that YBRS data as well. So we'll definitely have that before we move on this bill.
Yeah. I would say in terms of packaging size limits, the fact that, so the concern that teenagers consume is not impacted by packaging size limits. And the public safety rationale for packaging size limits has from the beginning been about protecting from accidental ingestion. And that's not, teenagers are not going out and accidentally ingesting cannabis. They are going and seeking it out. And that's bad, but it's not the same thing. And that is not being addressed in any way by the 50 milligram other than cost. And, I don't think it's a big enough cost to be a deterrent for teens. You would really have to make it much more expensive for that to be an effective deterrent. And there's probably better ways of doing it than packaging. You just directly, if you're interested in making cannabis more expensive, just increase the taxes.
Well, thank you for your testimony today and bringing your product here for us to see the packaging. I think that really illuminates exactly what it is that we're talking about, these very specific childproof containers.
This one's the worst.
That's so much packaging.
You might want to do.
Minimal amount of product.
So not only this, but you have to also put it in this because you have to get the labeling. This is all like required information, right? So you can't really get it on this.
Okay, so I missed that part. So the little jars in the bag?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you could try to attach it, but then it would be very ugly. You could try to like attach the bag.
Yeah, you could read it.
It's everything on the back here is your requirement. There's a warning sticker. There's several. These two logos are required. We at Florida decided because of the amount of content that's required, even for flour, to go with a box. Because on the box, we can put the warning labels more clearly. than if we were to go on a small jar. It's almost impossible to get that all on here without going to an even bigger jar, which then of course costs more money. And it's all a balancing act. We bought about 20,000 of these boxes before we opened. And you know, you have to order these things, by the way, months in advance because they all ship from China. It's not great.
Well, thank you for the demonstration. We are have your written testimony, and I have a few questions. I think I'll follow via email, but I appreciate you being here today. Representative Hooper.
All plastics, even, I mean,
So
McDonald's hasn't gotten the idea yet, but there are plastic straws that are compostable,
yeah,
plastic bags.
so all polymers and monomers are banned by rule. This has been a pain point for the industry. Personally, I'm over it. You know, I think we've solved it, and that's not a fight worth having with the CCB anymore. But they're all banned, and there is a waiver process, and that waiver process is how we ended up with this being approved. And as another example, there is a tiny bit of rubber inside this metal, which is really necessary to achieve an airtight seal, which is important because this is an aromatic and fresh product that is rapidly deteriorating. That rapid deterioration is one of the reasons as the previous witness mentioned, one of the reasons the product registration system is so burdensome as currently in place, hopefully being fixed.
Thanks, Dave, for being here. Really appreciate your testimony and your willingness to show off some of your packaging so that we can understand it a little better.
Bring a bus down to Florida. I'll give you guys a tour of the facility.
I may take you up on that. We get past crossover. So as Dave's packing up, I wanted to make a little bit of time, so I asked to have Andrea come and talk to us about technical corrections at 3. We'll take a break at 2:45. But I want to give a little bit to Chair Pepper to talk about a couple of things that popped up to consider as we look at this bill a little bit further later in the week amongst other work that we're doing. Chair Pepper, welcome back.
Hey, thank you very much for having me. For the record, James Pepper, Chair of the Vermont Cannabis Control Board. I'm happy to respond to any proposals or maybe thoughts that were inspired by some of the testimony you heard today. I think what you're seeing is, you know, the Cannabis Board has a mission that's somewhat independent from some of the either business owners or associations that represent this industry. You know, we have a public health, consumer safety mandate. We have a public safety mandate. We have an equity mandate. And it's not, you know, these issues aren't always perfectly aligned with what the industry wants. But I think everything in H270 was requested by the CCB. And whether, you know, that's the appropriate vehicle to add some of these issues to, I mean, that's certainly a possibility or certainly something that this committee could decide. I did want to I had two, I guess you could call them cleanup issues from our original introduction to the bill. And then one kind of new issue that has come up since the last time I testified, as things tend to happen in the cannabis industry. One of the cleanup bills, I'm just going to preview for them because Michelle has the language, but she couldn't be here today. You know, we asked for a propagation license. We think it's very important to kind of stem off kind of illegal or illicit market, legacy market seedlings from coming into the market, being the source material for a lot of the kind of cultivators, have a clean tested source for all of the cannabis plants that are in the industry. Michelle mentioned to us that in addition to just creating a license type, there needs to be specific rulemaking authority for what we are going to be making rules around, things like proper age restrictions, pesticide usage, things that exist for all of our other license types, we need specific to the propagation license. So I took what we do for cultivators, added a few additional kind of rulemaking authorities and sent that over to Michelle. And I think in the next version of the amendment or the next version of the bill, the next draft, you'll see that. And I just wanted to let you know that it's coming. Given the concern around the fingerprinting for medical caregivers, eliminating that requirement that we heard from Representative Hooper, I went back into my notes. So essentially that entire section of the bill around the medical program, we introduced that, or we asked Senator Sears to introduce that bill last year, and it didn't get taken off the wall. And so it really was just a repeat, kind of a copy and paste from a prior bill. And so I had to kind of go back to my notes and see, the elimination of that. Essentially what was going on at that time is we had applied for authorization at the Cannabis Board to receive fingerprint supported background checks, both for the adult use and for the medical program because of this new fingerprinting requirement. And we were waiting for that. While we were waiting, we waited for over a year, and this bill was pending while we were waiting for that authorization. And during that time, cannabis boards across the country were getting denied the ability to receive fingerprint supported background checks by the FBI. And so we didn't know whether or not we were going to get that authority. And so we asked for this to be eliminated because we may very well have found ourselves in kind of a statutory responsibility yet legal impossibility situation. Subsequently to last April, we did get the authority to receive fingerprint supported background checks just for caregivers, not for the adult use program. We had to kind of shift gears and create a different process for doing background checks for the adult use program. But all that's to be said is that I guess just leave it to this committee to decide whether they want caregivers to be fingerprinted. We have the authority to do it. It takes, the process is, a caregiver will come to us with an application to get fingerprint supported background checks. You go to your local sheriff's office. They use ink in all but Chittenden County. And it takes about 2 weeks to get that back. If there's no issues, if there's no smudges or anything like that, there's a electronic version in Chittenden County in Burlington that can turn them around in about 3 days. It's a $35 charge. I think my testimony from last week still holds that when you have an adult use system alongside a medical program, the authorization that you're giving a caregiver is pretty minimal. Essentially you can go either grow your 2 plants or 7 immature plants for a patient, or you can go to a kind of medical dispensary and purchase on behalf of a patient tax-free. And that's it. They're subject to the, limitations as to how much they can purchase at a time. It's really just those 2 authorizations that you're giving to a medical caregiver. If the caregiver program didn't exist, a person could just go to an adult use store on behalf of a person and bring them medicine. So really, having this extra step for a caregiver, and, again, these are people that are mostly direct, close relations of the patients. Is it too onerous or not? I leave it up to the committee, but it just seems a little bit unnecessary. If the kind of the decision is made to do what we propose, the Vermont background check plus checking these 2 registries, the kind of abuse registry and the child registry, then both Dale and DCF have asked for an amendment to it that would have the same effect. They'll still do the check, but currently under their statutes and under their rules, they can't just give it out to the CCB. So they have to initiate a CCB or a rulemaking process. And they've asked to just add the statutory authority. So I sent that amendment that they requested. They said they'd be happy to testify, but it's relatively straightforward what they're requesting. So Michelle has that amendment as well. And then the new issue. So we had our first product recall. We had a contamination event. We're actively investigating what's going on. We've tested, I think, over 30 samples in relation to that event. And we've kind of have a now working theory of how that product moved into a retail store, several retail stores and made it to the public. However, this investigation is ongoing. We've received a number of public records requests about it, and we are of the opinion that as soon as a investigation is closed, the documents become public. But, essentially every investigation is initiated by something that we see or by an allegation that is unsubstantiated. And I know OPR has a public records process for their licensees, the Office of Professional Regulation, that is designed to kind of balance the kind of reputational damage an allegation can have on one of their licensees and the public's right to know. And they have a registry, a public-facing registry that they maintain, which has kind of a summary of an allegation. The names are kind of redacted, but a summary of the allegations, a summary of the investigation that's updated. And then if there is a kind of administrative action that's taken by the Office of Professional Regulation, then they start posting the kind of the notices of violations that were issued, the rulings, the transcripts of the hearings, et cetera. With the names of the people. And our new general counsel was the longtime general counsel at OPR, and he's modified that kind of OPR public records process just strictly related to open investigations for the CCB. And we think that it makes sense for us to kind of follow this well-trodden path with respect to kind of license violations or investigations. So Michelle has that language as well. I think, public records are some of the most kind of sacred things that government can do, is to be transparent, open about their processes. At the same time, it's always balanced with kind of the potential for undue reputational damage that just the mere allegation can have. So those are the three issues. Happy to talk about any three. Happy to talk about anything that was raised by the Growers Association or Mr. Silverman as well.
Representative Hooper.
Chair Pepper, I'm curious, how did the contamination scenario get flagged? Or did you already tell us?
No, it was a phone call. Someone called the CCB and said that they were experiencing headache, stomach ache, diarrhea, and our director of compliance took the call and is very, he set up the pesticides program for the Agency of Agriculture, and he recognized this as a potential pesticide exposure. And so we met up with the individual. We took a sample from him. We took samples of all the strains at the store that he purchased it from, and then we've taken samples of the kind of from the cultivator and from all of the stores that it was at. And it's all under quarantine, I should say, while we're conducting this investigation. The ones that have tested positive have been destroyed, those strands. Sure. I think we're close to wrapping up the investigation.
You did isolate the contaminant?
Yes.
And does that all take place in Randolph? At that lab?
No, so that's in the agricultural lab, and they're not allowed to touch cannabis there. So we have to use currently the kind of commercial, the private cannabis labs. There's two of them that are authorized to test for pesticides currently. And that's, part of the impetus behind asking for an expansion to the agricultural lab in Randolph is to allow for kind of more robust compliance testing, quality assurance testing.
Waters Evans.
Thank you. Are there products available through the medical use market, like at those places where you would purchase those things that are not available through the adult use market?
There are, yeah.
Is it a lot or?
I would say the main ones are the high THC solid concentrates. And again, there's a separate bill that deals with that issue. In response to a legislative request, we wrote a report about whether or not that prohibition should remain for the adult use side. And then there's services that are available as well that are on the medical side, like delivery, that, we're not asking for on the adult use side, but are very helpful for people that are suffering from extreme medical conditions, and maybe can't get to the dispensary. And then there's also products that just don't really not really profitable on the adult use side, when you add in a profit motive to kind of the adult use side, that are very important for certain types of conditions. There's something called RSO, Rick Simpson oil, that's very high in CBD, low in THC, so non-psychoactive, that just doesn't really have a market on the adult use side. And so what we do is we require the medical dispensaries to keep a 3-month supply of those for their medical patients if they're going to operate on the adult use side as well. So there's ways that we're kind of using the carrot of allowing medical dispensaries to participate in the adult use to make sure that patients are held harmless.
So it sounds like, so I, in response to the initial email from Chair Pepper, have asked Michelle, when we come back to this bill later in the week, to incorporate the couple of tweaks that we talked about. I think there's an open question for the committee that I'd like you all to think about. We don't need to wrestle with it too much today, around the background check issue, and if we want to kind of take the Dale DCF recommendation, or whether it really makes sense to even leave that section in the bill. So we should be thinking about that. And when we have some committee discussion on this later in the week, or if folks want to give me their sentiments about that, I think that's worth thinking about. I think it makes sense for us to use this OPR model. So I will we'll look at Attorney Legislative Council's draft and dig into that a little bit in terms of especially when a complaint hasn't been substantiated, but there's reason for, public health and public safety to, have some public facing information about there being the possibility or a complaint having been heard. Am I understanding that's the balance that you're trying to strike with that new proposal, that we have the ability to say, yeah, there's been a complaint, but it hasn't been substantiated yet, et cetera?
Yes. If we believe it's credible, like this instance, we reacted very quickly. And I think before, and I'll get the exact kind of timing of this. I think before we even had the first round of testing back, we put out a stop sale on all of this one cultivator's products, which did, I think, this claim was substantiated. Had that claim not been substantiated, that could have done extreme reputational damage to this. No one's gonna. If we got a claim of a potential pesticide contamination and it turned out to be a false claim, or maybe a competitor trying to kind of undermine another licensee, it might be hard to survive that if you're a small tier 1 cultivator. And so, yes, you're absolutely right that this is trying to balance the needs of the public's right to know about these issues, but also just kind of making sure that we aren't doing unnecessary damage before we actually have all the facts.
Representative?
Sure. I think you said you'd comment on some of the growers' recommendations as well. Or
I'll stay for as long until you tell me to stop. All right.
If there are specific things, there was a lot that we got from the Growers Association. I think some of those items are being discussed elsewhere in the building. Some of those items are not in our purview, but if there's anything you're particularly interested, we have a few more minutes before I wanted to break. I'm happy to throw things out there for.
I can wait. There is a lot there, and I know you probably have.
Yeah, product registration. There is a lot. There's, I think, 6 proposals directly related to product registration. I would just say product registration, was passed in the fee bill last year. So it was new, and we had already put out an RFP. We had already started building our licensing portal by the time we were told that we also have to register products. So it was not just kind of new to the industry, it was new to us, and we had to create an interim solution in order to register products that was very inefficient. Essentially, we used just a Microsoft form. We had 3 inboxes, one for the registration form, one for the fee payment, and one for the test results and the pictures of the packaging and the kind. And so we had to, behind the scenes, match all of those things up. And it did take a while. We've subsequently amended our RFP. It's been, the kind of product registration has been unified with our licensing portal. So it's all tied to a license number. And we are estimating it's going to take about 2.5 weeks under our current staffing regime to get through a complete product registration. I think that's, I can understand how people would like that to be 5 days. We have asked for, we've asked for expanded lab capacity, a lab director and 2 chemists. Our intention is to have the chemists, looking through those certificates of analysis and helping kind of. It's very easy for a chemist to look at a test result and know the kind of points that are important. It's much more challenging to kind of train a licensing agent who doesn't have a chemistry background. And so we've shifted some of our, we've currently shifted some of our enforcement team that have this kind of background to do product registration. We've cleared kind of some of the more perishable items first. We move those to the front so that, anything that might be approaching its, sell-by date is cleared. And we think that, by adding some lab capacity and we also have this hemp report. You guys gave us the authority to regulate hemp-derived products. We have a proposal out there on how to do that. There is a request in there, depending on how you all kind of give us the authority to make rules around this, how you want to see the hemp market evolve. There's a request for an additional position that's for product registration to register hemp-derived products. So I think, we're not asking for the 2 positions that the Growers Association is. However, we are asking this year for additional resources that will be, helpful in the product registration process.
Thank you.
I'm going to give the committee a 15-minute break here, and then we're going to switch gears. Chair Pepper, thanks for giving us a preview of a couple of these tweaks and changes. We'll pick up H270 later in the week, and my hope is that we can kind of prioritize the sections and actually get this out before crossover when we return. So we'll do a little bit more testimony this week on it. Come back to it after the